Welcome to this webinar hosted by Department of Design Space, which is bringing together people from different streams. We have founder members from co-working industry, design thinker and future thinking expert, business strategist, social woman entrepreneur, trend analyst, and design educator. And we have a moderator, Ms. Deepa Soman, Managing Director, Lumiere Business Private Limited. Deepa has been entrepreneur past 2 decades. She started Lumiere Consultancy Services in Jamaica. Deepa's life and Lumiere journey is profiled in Rashmi Bansal's 2013 book, Follow Your Rainbow, on 25 Women Entrepreneur. Deepa, a people collector and connector, founded Lumiere Business Solutions in 1990 as a social enterprise, and it sowed the seed of the idea work from home. Lumiere was the first work from home opportunity provider for women professionals to get them back to work. Lumiere is also taught as a case study in many educational institutes. I just like to start with a brief introduction of today's topic, co-working. Co-working has been the hub of another seed of startup ecosystems in India over the last few years because they gave critical identity to those entrepreneurs who were starting out alone. They had an ecosystem that could depend on and people that they could get inspired from or mentored by the same and find synergies and ways together. Like all other industries, that is obviously set to change due to COVID pandemic, and the whole group that is going to be there consists of consumers, startup, and enterprises themselves. And on the other end, founders of this co-working unicorn per se, who will have discussions around how does co-working industry see the current pandemic? Is it an opportunity or panic? What's the way forward? Is COVID disrupting co-working spaces? It would be interesting to see the platform which is driving enterprises in past. How are they planning to nurture such enterprises in future? And we have a fantastic panel here to bring in the perspective from around the world. Trend from co-working space to work from home. What is the future of this rising trend? On behalf of Department of Design Space, I'm honored to welcome our august panel members and our moderator, Deepa Soman, and everyone who have registered and attending the webinar. Thank you for tuning in. It's over to you, Deepa.
Thank you. Thank you, Rashmi. What a pleasure. Thank you, NIFT and the department for this really interesting opportunity you've given all of us and this fabulous platform. For all the participants who've come in the NIFT community, I feel very close to welcome. And it's a great time. It's raining here in Mumbai. So that's a little word of caution. If we go off on air, there's enough speakers to keep up the tempo. Dr. Shalini Sood is from Delhi and is signed in from Delhi NIFT. Manoj Kothari, Turian Labs from Pune, and the rest of us. I think, Shrishti, you're in Mumbai as well, right?
I'm in Delhi. I'm Delhi based.
You're in Delhi, okay. So we've got some Delhi representation. Shesh, where have you signed in from?
I'm in Bangalore.
Oh, lovely. So then we've got a nice representation. Anand, you're in Mumbai.
I'm in Goa, actually.
You're in Goa. Oh, we are jealous.
It's place to be right now.
That's not fair.
Where are you joined in from?
I'm in Gurgaon actually, and
You're
I'm
in
really
Gurgaon.
yearning for some rain here. Yeah, so you've got a good representation
I've
here.
got a good representation. So that's only Rashmi and me from Navi Mumbai. But then we should begin, with a quick introduction. First of all, that topic is so fantastic, and I like to say that we started from home so many years ago, and then we moved to coffee shops. And then we moved from coffee shops to co-working spaces.
Yeah.
And then again, from co-working spaces, we are now back in our homes and of course in the co-working spaces. So life comes full circle. France, people are again working in coffee shops, of course, socially distanced. On the streets of Paris, you don't mind it. You're sitting a little away from your colleague and you've started work again. In Germany, people are doing very much the same. Israel, a little bit is happening, I guess, time to time, lockdown. And when you talk of startup ecosystem, you have to bring Israel into the discourse. So yes, we are. My mandate today is to do justice to some really, really smart people who are here on my panel, who are really pioneers of the industry of co-working. And we also have a user, and because we in design, in innovation, we talk about it being user centric and customer centric. I'm going to first start this. I'll introduce Rashri, and then of course I'll introduce all my panel. So Rashri Sai is a very, very august, interesting personality. All of, 31, we don't talk about her age, but when you have decided very early to be a social impact person and been, she's a 30 under 30 achiever. So Rashri, you have in your work at Impact Tree, as well as your Zupa, you'll have used co-working spaces. So you're going to be kicking off this conversation. So welcome to this panel. I'll quickly come back to you. Then I'm going to Anand Demuri. Anand is has given us 91 springboard, and he's a Stanford graduate who decided to come back after spending 6 years in the US working in the startup ecosystem. And he joined his classmates Pranay and Varun to give us 91 springboard, and he oversees 27 co-working spaces across India. Of course, he's sitting in Goa right now, making us feel very, very jealous. And you're going to be telling us how it all started for you and where you think this is headed, right? So, a very different kind of a co working space started by startup people who understood the startup ecosystem. He also has, 4 medical patents to his credit. So he's again a very interesting person. You must follow what they say on social media. I'll come to Shrishti. Shrishti Dheer is the founder of Hub and Oak, and she's an entrepreneur. They have 4 centers in Delhi, and there's 2 more that you're launching in a couple of months, Shrishti. And you also work and operate a company that invests in distressed assets, Alchemist ARC, and you've restructured debt. Very, very happy to meet you, have you on this panel. And you, along with Vikas, are part of IWA, the Indian Workspace Association, which came out at the time of COVID. You were in talks for some time. Vikas, welcome again, founder Insta Office, and you're a co-member of IWA. You've been in the financial, the private equity space. You understand investing behind these. So it's a lovely blend and mix of this audience, each one bringing so much value. Shesh Paplikar, welcome, CEO, Beehive, and yours. We'll also understand a little bit about where you draw your inspiration from. Manoj Kothari, Manoj, IIT Bombay alumnus and NIFT, NID alumnus, also teaching at business schools like the ISB in Hyderabad, and also visiting faculty at NID. And founder, he's a multiple startup founder, the currently Turian Labs and also Onyo, and a very, very highly respected design researcher who has done so much for the subject or the discipline of design thinking. Welcome, Manoj, and space design. So we're going to be hearing a lot from you. And you're also a trends expert. So you're going to be a very important speaker on our panel. And last but not the least, the Dr. Shalini Sood, who is not only faculty in NIFT, but also a trend spotter and a trends expert, who's going to be talking to us about her insights on the whole movement. She's also someone very inspiring. She leads an NGO, an initiative called Touch Your Soul, and she's been working with educational and medical needs in the 19 schools of Pauri Garhwal region, covering 337 villages. So she's also a social impact person who also has so much more to bring to the table. So coming to our topic today, and so interestingly, we're talking really about COVID-19 and, of course, what's happening in the times of COVID and how our industry is getting affected. So, Rashi, what happened to you in terms of how you started? You first started working, and now you've again gone back to working. Of course, lockdown starts tomorrow, but tell us a little bit about the last 4 years of your experience with co-working and co-working spaces.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of a company called Impactry, and we work with social data and in helping organizations in the space of rural livelihoods and education scale up their programs. So we work with international donors, international MNCs, corporates, and in India. We started our journey incidentally in 91 Springboard. I think that time 91 Springboard Raheja complex had just come up, the first in Bombay. That's where that time Impactry was still in an ideation stage. We're doing very initial levels of business. And then at the same time, I have another startup in the electronic hardware space of drones and automobiles called Zupa. So, that was also just coming to a point of refinement. So, Springboard was very crucial for us because at the initial stage, the first complex that we had, it really gave a whole sense of community because for the first time I entered a space where everyone was thinkers, everyone was trying to do something. It was very inspiring because people would sit up till, days in office and 12 o'clock in the night. And there was just so much energy around, entrepreneurs saying that, here we are going to create change, we're going to build a product, we're going to launch it. Incidentally, our first funder also was someone, and an advisor who continues to be on our board was a person who sat next to me. And it started with just random conversations on life, and then it moved on with us to get our P-Series A from him. So I think in that sense, it was a very nice space in the initial days, and actually it continues to be a very nice space to be because. Like I said earlier, that as I was a person who I was a company secretary and a lawyer, and really when I came into the industry and got my listed company job, which was like the pinnacle when you're studying, we went into recession. So at that point of time, I had like 5 months of doing nothing. You would go and log in the morning at 9, you'll walk out at like 5, and you do nothing all day because it's recession. So after a point of time, I did quit because I decided to really do something on my own. I felt I needed to find that space. It was very interesting. It took me 2-3 years before I actually came to a co-work, but I think that's where it came together because it can be a lonely journey. So there you find a lot of thinkers, a lot of dreamers, a lot of crazy people like you who are willing to throw it all and say it doesn't matter. And I think that helped us keep moving further. We also, like I said, moved across co-works. We worked till yesterday. Now we will be moving into SEBA. But I think each of them brings their own space and each of them has their own energy that they get in. Springboard, for one, we found really great for startups, and we still continue to be in touch with a lot of the community people. When we went to WeWork, of course, the experience was more refined in that sense because the businesses coming into WeWork are a lot more scaled in that sense, and many of them are in P-Series B, C, and onwards. So there we found a different kind of set of people, but we also understood a lot around scale there because most people who walked in had a large or growing organization. There were a bunch of corporates also there who were seated. So interacting with those people, I think, helped us refine our way and our thought process a lot more because, when we moved from the startup stage to a scale space, we found that that really worked for us in that sense. And like I said, I have a 1.5-year-old daughter. So it makes working at home very challenging for me currently. But so I've incidentally moved back into my workspace. And the last 3 weeks we've been working out of there. So I definitely think that, there is a great outlook for the industry and, co-work as such, because So a lot of students who today are thinking, what are you doing? Where are you going? We've had, a lot of institutes get sending in interns. Even NIFT has sent us a few interns and we've worked with them. Very nice and bright bunch of people. So I think just a co-working space is a great space for them to start like connecting with people, working with startups, thinking of something on your own. And I think then slowly building, because we've seen a lot of student entrepreneurs also who start off with just that, I'm going to hang around here for 4 hours after college. And then after that, they get connected. They start off with a video editing project. And I know a person who's like just, he didn't finish college. He barely finished college, but he built a company around photography and video editing.
Wow.
So I think that's
That's
a
nice.
lot of space. That is what an co-work could bring to you. It's an early incubation kind of a environment where you start thinking where you have to go. And I think it is going to get more interesting because as we go more hyper local with this pandemic, right? Corporates are wanting to kind of today not send people across the city, but work near your homes. So I think you're going to start hopefully having corporate footfall coming in. And
Nice.
definitely there are a lot of people who want to quit and want to think. So there is a lot of ways that you can actually collaborate and go forward. So I think the future for, co-work for me looks great. It might move a lot into incubation. It might move into hyper-localness, but I think there is a space for it to become relevant today.
Beautiful. Very, very, very well articulated. Thank you for that. Anand, here's your client, your first, that's, I think 91 Springboard is her first love. So maybe you should go next and tell us about, how you stumbled upon this idea. I mean, all of us were doing, clever things like working from home, but you saw this as an opportunity and I think, was it also some Silicon Valley experience and all of that led to this?
Um, yeah, actually it was. So when we started back in 2012, we launched our first space in 2013. But while we were doing the homework, one of the questions we asked ourselves is, these spaces are basically commodities, right? The table and chair and rent and all that, like anyone can do, right? So how are we going to add value to our customers, right? And at that point, the vast majority of our customers were startups, freelancers, maybe not VC fundable sort of tech product kind of companies, but all like independent people trying to build something,
Yeah.
right? And in thinking about how do we add value to them, that's where, Varun had spent time in New York, I had spent time in Silicon Valley and LA. Um, Pranay had been running IIM Ahmedabad's incubator for quite some time. So, we thought about like, okay, when we did startups earlier, when we worked with startups, how did we get help? Right. And very honestly, like Dallas, Texas is also not a great place to do a startup, right? Compared to
Okay.
Silicon Valley, right? Delhi maybe or Bangalore may be a better place than Dallas, right? And basically, our conclusion was it's the ecosystem, that community, right? It's not mentors coming and giving gyan from above. It's most of our learnings actually came from our peer group.
Yes.
Most of our customers, most of our referrals, connections, advice, partners, they all come from, like what's the first thing you do when you have a problem? You like, there's a WhatsApp group of other entrepreneurs and you put your problem there, right? So that's how we started, and the Navi Mumbai space, the Raheja space that Rajvi mentioned was, I think it was our third space ever, right? And obviously things have evolved since then. Um, Many of the companies that joined us have grown. So we have a wider set of SMEs and larger companies, including some large multinationals today. But that community structure and that uh, culture and ethos of people helping each other is something we've tried to maintain. It has its own challenges as you get bigger, right? But that's something we've always tried to do, right? Um, so now coming to, I think, as Rajvi mentioned, some of the more recent developments, right? Um, so even before COVID, about 20, 25% of our members were working from home.
Okay.
They were freelancers who could go to a coffee shop, work from home, do whatever, but they chose to come to a co-working spaces because there's other needs, right? Like, I also have a 2-year-old. I'm in the office today, right? And just the need to connect with people, right? This community, technically speaking, you could build a community on LinkedIn also, right?
Correct.
But there is something, we're doing a video call, we're not doing a phone call. There is something about meeting someone, meeting them face to face, hanging out with them, having a coffee, things like that. So those needs we do see coming back. I think the next 3 to 6 months are going to be difficult. I don't think anything is coming back immediately. But what we are seeing is this uh, uh, there's a demand for the flexibility that co-working offers, right? So keep in mind that co-working is only 2% of the commercial real estate market, right? Now, the other 98% who used to work in a more traditional setup, they are now thinking of things like, can our employees work closer to home and be this more hyper-local model, right? Where a more distributed team. And even 6 months from now, 1 year from now, it's, when things settle down, it's not like people are really keen to sign a 5-year lease, right? They still want that flexibility that a managed integrated offering like co-working and managed offices have, right? And it's a big market. There's many flavors of it. We have a bunch of other people on the call who can talk through, what all parts of the market are seeing.
Nice.
But in our case, at least, we have the other 98% of the market. We're seeing a fairly large volume of interest from them, and all with new needs, right? They don't want a regular office. They want this flexibility. They want other formats and so on. And I think most of them are looking at like August, September, October is when they'd like to start experimenting with these new formats. Right? So short term, slightly cautious, but long term, optimistic.
Nice.
That's it. Yeah.
Nice. Very, very pragmatic. Thank you. I'm going to come to Shrishti. Shrishti, how?
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
What's your perspective? How did you stumble upon, or was it planned? How did you uh, first begin this initiative?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. Thank you to NIFT and all the panel members and the NIFT community for being a part of this. Just wanted to just say one more line about my introduction. I think it was, I don't think I gave a adequate brief. But I lived in London for quite a few years. I did my master's from London Business School. I worked in financial risk management to start with in London. I moved back, was it basically involved in distressed debt investing, which I'm still involved in at this point of time. And as you can well imagine, distressed debt is really growing at this point of time. And of course, managing that debt and managing investing in this environment is something that I do look at. Co-working was something that I got involved in because of my interest in real estate. I had a bit of interest in real estate because of distressed assets, and I did realize that, as Anand was mentioning, that real estate is just one small part of what is co-working, and there is a lot that co-working space providers do add to to add to the community and to the users beyond just the real estate. And as Rajshri was mentioning, she met her first funder at the space, and as Anand was mentioning, it's all about your community, who you're surrounded by, and bouncing those ideas off each other. So I think talking about the topic, trends in workspaces and where it's going, I really do believe that while that there is a short-term disruption, I think there is a massive short-term disruption. A lot of people do not want to expose themselves. They want to keep the exposure as limited as possible, and there is a massive short-term disruption. But I think over a period of I don't know if I'd put a timer on it, because I don't know when the pandemic is likely to wane, or when people's confidence is likely to go up. But the value proposition is definitely there. So there is no doubt in my mind that it will revive again. And of course, there is a lot of people who are looking for a lot more flexibility at this point of time. As trend in a workspace, people are going in for a lot of flexibility. So where there were long term leases, and very specific large corporates working out of one corporate headquarters, there is flexibility on different fronts. Like they may want some smaller offices in different locations, or they may want some flexibility. Like I have a client who just wants to meet her team once a week. Like that's their goal, is basically to come to the office once a week. So they want that flexibility, which a commercial lease can probably not offer them. So I think there's more demand for flexibility than there was in the past. And there is more demand for local access, and remote offices, and those kind of things. And especially because now at this point of time, where people are constrained with their finances, I don't think it is viable for anyone in the growth stage to spend their money on real estate, on investing in interiors of a property, or to that's another aspect of this. Like they want to keep that flexibility with them. So when it comes to co-working, I think yes, of course there's a short term disruption, but the medium to long term, I too am quite optimistic about this space. And I think that it's just going to grow. And I would encourage young entrepreneurs, people who are working on growth companies, startups, venture builders and stuff like that. They should come and work out of a co-working, because the environment is just fantastic. It's very different from working at home, or working with your own colleagues. You get new ideas every single day, and that's basically what pushes you to grow.
Thank you, Srishti. That's really empowering, and I think lots of ideas. Good to know. Yes, we missed that part about your London stint, and I was curious, and I would have asked you how you got into distressed assets, and I would have done that offline. But thank you
Yeah,
for giving us that
sure.
context.
Of course. Thanks.
Vikas, what's your story, and how did IWA? And both of you are associated with IWA. I'm very, very curious to know.
Thanks, Deepa. Sorry, I was on mute. So, see, I've got a very cliched entrepreneurial story. And till the time it happened to me, I always thought that these stories were scripted. But I started out by solving a problem for myself. So when I became an entrepreneur, I really did not have an office to sit out of. And after you spent a few years with that sort of discipline, waking up in the morning, getting to your office, picking up a coffee on the way. And so every morning after I became an entrepreneur, I had a dabba ready, but I did not have an office to go to. I'll just share a quick story. I remember in my first interview when I got out of, after my master's, in London, when I was being interviewed, I was asked that why did I want to become a banker? And I shared a fairly juvenile aspiration, which was, I never wanted to grow old, which say that I wanted to stay relevant. And I think today, if anybody wants to stay relevant and never wants to grow old, he's got to be in a co-working space, really. There's just no other way. So this is how it started. I started sitting out of, when I became an entrepreneur, I started sitting out of a fairly, one of the more traditional business center chains called Regis. A lot of people would have heard of it. And on a more objective note, it seemed like a fairly interesting problem to solve. And I think everybody's talked about this already, and I'll briefly reflect on that myself, which is that co-working as an industry is a shared economy model, and it's got three shared resources. One is the physical, which is the real estate. The second is the logistical, which is the services, the value add that comes with it. But the third, which is the most interesting bit, is the people, which is the intellectual resources. Now that is really something that you can't really manufacture. It's got to be with the people who are there. And that's the most exciting part of being in a co-working space. And this is how we started. We are currently in Delhi, Gurgaon, Delhi, NCR, Bangalore, and Hyderabad. And we rarely ever try to talk about the spaces. It's the people who are there with you. And that's what really generally defines a co-working space. And I can actually speak on behalf of almost everyone. It's pretty much the same case with almost every co-working space. This is what they would probably be proud of mostly. With regards to the IWA, see, we as an industry, we are a fairly young industry, which means we are distributed, we are fragmented, there is limited standardization, and we've seen fairly strong growth over the last couple of years, which also means that we grew very fast with very limited definition to how we were really doing that. So to bring all of this under a more defined more defined landscape, bring under a single umbrella where we could have a platform where all of us could come together to discuss fundamental issues about the industry. This had been on the cards for a fairly long time. We had been in discussions, and I'll share a very simple example. We are still not very well defined as an industry. We don't know we are a real estate industry, we are a hospitality industry, what we are, because we are a fairly young industry, right? And so the whole idea of coming together to solve these fundamental problems was always there. But COVID crisis just really expedited it. We really, and I can again speak on behalf of almost all the industries that nobody knew how to really address this problem. We were all caught completely unaware or unprepared for it. So, IWA basically came together immediately for a couple of things to address in the immediate term. One was to just sort of define some of the best practices in terms of readiness, hygiene, safety in all our centers. And again, these guidelines had been coming from various sources, ministries, relevant bodies. But again, the information was so distributed and fragmented, not everybody had access or the resources to really fully understand them. So we came together to put together a bunch of documents with multiple consultations and review of these documents so that we could help and guide the entire industry with regards to these things. At the same time, we wrote to the relevant ministries and the bodies to get necessary support in the immediate term. As Anand and Shrishti already mentioned, that in the immediate term, the pain is somewhat deep. So we tried to reach out to relevant bodies. We wrote to the finance ministry, tried to get their attention to our industry and how we had been instrumental to not just the startup ecosystem, but just generally the business ecosystem in the country. So we try to bring their attention to our industry. We got some support and we were still in discussions. So the idea of IWA during this time was to come together in immediate terms to solve or address the challenges that COVID had posed to us. And of course, then drive the long-term agenda of the industry as things start to settle down.
Mm-hmm.
I would just like to add here that Pranay is not here, but Pranay is an integral part of IWA as well. I guess it was missed out as well. Shesh is also one of the core members of IWA. And he's been fairly supportive and instrumental in driving our agenda at this point.
Very nice. And it's so today, how many members do you all have in how IWA has all of them? Are all the co-working spaces now members of IWA?
No, we've actually got about more than 50 across the country. Oh. And when I say more than 50, many of them are large operators. So if we were to think of centers, there'd be much more than 50 actually. And it's across the country. We still have limited bandwidth and administrative resources, but we've got a lot of interest from multiple other co-working spaces as well. And these are some of the things that we're trying to streamline and organize over the coming few weeks.
And because I'm just curious, because government has always been so, forward about entrepreneurship for the last some time, or MSMEs, whether it's startups. What kind of support have you been able to garner from government, if I may, since your founding about 8 weeks ago?
Sure. So see, on that note, I must add that there is what we've seen is that the support from the government has come in a systemic way. We haven't seen a support coming specifically targeted to our industry yet. I haven't seen that for not many industries yet. But some of the things that we tried to bring the ministry's attention to was immediately lack of liquidity. But in a broader, sort of in a more systemic way, what we've seen is that for the most part, TDS returns have been refunded in multiple states, which has given a little bit more liquidity. We actually tried to request for more disbursals from SME schemes. There's a scheme called CGTMSE, but we tried to get more preferred disbursals from these SME lending schemes. But we saw again a more systemic, more wide plan from the government around this issue. We also asked for a bunch of these things, but again, we've seen that there has been a more systemic or a more wider addressal of these problems as opposed to a specific solution for our industry as such.
Yeah. But it's a good thing that the association is formed, and I understand that globally this has been the norm for the industry to have different countries have their own association.
See, I don't I would not really really comment on that because it's still it's still early years for this industry. We haven't seen a lot of organized associations, but what we've seen is that it's a very collaborative industry. I mean, that's the fundamental DNA of our industry, and this is absolutely beautiful that during this time, all the players have come together to solve a common problem. And this is what we've seen generally in the industry as such across across board. Then we haven't seen a lot of associations, but we've seen highly collaborative groups of co-working operators across the globe.
Well, thank you. I think that's very important and necessary. That's a very, very good insight. Sheesh, can you tell us a little bit about Beehive and how it started? Hyderabad, you're in Bangalore right now, Hyderabad? I missed that again.
Yeah, Bangalore.
Bangalore. Y'all have been, I think, the pioneers as a city. You've always have, it's a city that's been leading this area, has it not been that?
Yes, I think definitely. Bangalore has been on the forefront as a city for both co-working and of course startups as well. I think at least whenever I read the stats last, I think 45% plus startups of India are in Bangalore. And I think also quite often I've met many people who started in Jaipur and various places. When they got funding, the investors told it's time to relocate to Bangalore. So I think
our own Silicon Valley, right? Our very own Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I think definitely. So Bangalore has been a good place, and I'm really glad that we started here, and actually we have stayed in Bangalore. So till now we have done 13 properties, and all of them have been in Bangalore. I think to a brief, I think about me, I think I delayed somewhere. I think I was unable to send earlier. So quickly is. I think I was kind of reading. It looks like everybody's story. There are some similarities. All of us have been abroad and came to India, and somehow it looks like came to India to start co-working. But and maybe not all of us. I think it also looks like none of us came to India to start co-working, but all of us here have ended up doing that. So even I have a bit of similarity. I was working for Bloomberg in New York. Also have been primarily in the financial. I was in the technology, but on the financial domain. I was with Bank of America, Citigroup as well. So spent a lot of time there, and came to India because I was a CTO for a startup in New York, and I came to set up the development center here.
Okay.
And it was just of course I think some of the coincidences were that in US our startup was based out of WeWork. Most likely, I think it was one of the older WeWork, and on the Soho West. I think it's probably like the second WeWork. I think the first one was I think very small, and the second was probably the first of the slightly bigger. They're taking a full building. Okay. So and then it also happens that WeWork's headquarters of that time, which was on Fulton Street, was actually literally the immediate next building of my house. I just had to cross my street to get there in downtown part of New York. And I don't know, somewhere this whole thing was there. I was a huge fan of WeWork, and I used to, in fact, when my friends wanted to meet me, I used to call them to WeWork. In fact, I used to call them to WeWork on Fridays and like have beer with them. So I used to do a lot of these things. I was a big fan of WeWork and the community. I'd somehow seen that even though Bloomberg actually has one of the best offices in New York, including TV studios and etc. I somehow felt I was happier in WeWork, so because the community, when you work for a corporate, you go in the office may be amazing, but I realize that nobody really talks to you unless they're in your team. You go and sit there, and so everybody just hangs out with their own team, right? Whereas I realize in WeWork, as meeting so many founders, so many things, I'm like, wow, so this is like something very different, so everybody's curious what the other guy is doing, right? In a corporate, like nobody really cares like what the other team is doing. So basically, I think there's a lot of energy around it. And when I came to India, I think that was a huge, somewhere that I felt like a huge step down in certain sense. One is I came back to India after 8 years living in US. So I think that itself was a difficulty for me because I think I got so used to the US lifestyle. And also the lack of co-working space. There was like no co-working space. In fact, to be very honest, I did a lot of research and figured out there is a co-working space called 91 Springboard in India. Then I saw they didn't have a Bangalore on their drop-down list. I think that seemed like the only co-working space like I was thinking of that I found at the time, to be very honest, in terms of what is value for money, where there is community, where there are startups. So I had a certain concept of tick marks of what I wanted. I realized nothing was there in Bangalore that matched all these, right? So then somehow when I was actually moving out of, I was actually looking to start my own data science company. In Bloomberg also, I was in the data acquisition team. So I was looking to start a data science company, and it so happened that I realized that since there is no good co-working space, I was like, I may end up going back, getting frustrated with India because I actually spend a lot of time in office. I more than 12, 13 hours. I'm usually every day at office, right? Even today or even through all lockdowns, to be very honest, I've been at office. I was just waiting to get my pass through lockdown 1, 2, 3, 4, almost every single day other than Sunday I come here. So whether there's anybody there or not, you can be assured that I'll be in my office. So I kind of I think Vikas would also know I'm very militantly support coming back to office. So very strongly, of course, if the spike is there, I think so my whole stat was that Bangalore had very less cases till recently, right? So essentially, I started Beehive out of. I realized that I need to probably like start a co-working space and have my tech company within that. And what I did was I actually started in a villa. I took a like really big villa in that sense in Koramangala, which actually could support more than 100 people. Wow. Quite a large villa. So I think also the community aspect was very strong. And you, as you know, I think a house or a villa is built for community, right? It has a central place. Everything is designed in a way where people end up in common areas, right? Yeah. Where they run into each other. And also I would say Beehive has gone through a lot of transformation. I would say initially Beehive was like a hip place, I would definitely call. I think I was trying to replicate Manhattan as well. I used to live in Manhattan. So one of the things, some of the things I did was like more than half of my staff was from abroad at that time. So I think from US, like Canada, like Europe, Poland, Russia, like I figured out various places. So I also used to be, obviously, if you're in New York, you're a multicultural team. So I thought like, I was completely like, I think that's the difference, right? You're coming from somewhere else, you're thinking completely differently. It takes time to get tuned to the place, right? So somewhere it became like it's a hip place where people used to come and hang out and, party. Honestly, I would say like partying. A lot of these things were happening at Beehive. And also it was an inflection point. It was like I started in November 2014. And that I think that was the time when things were taking off. And all the groups in Bangalore is like, hey, there is this place where, a lot of these cool stuff is happening. A lot of startups are there. And so I used to do so much parties, get liquor, literally I was just doing whatever I thought was right, and people were like, honestly, of course, like all these guys, like, even if, so it felt hip, right? You have so many foreign crowd and all, they're actually coming here to work. And so started another villa in Indranagar, another in HSR. Somehow I got all my locations right, Again, somebody was asking me, did you do data science research and all? I said like nothing like that. I was just there so I took Koramangala. Then everybody was asking, when are you starting in Indranagar? I said, okay, let me start in Indranagar. Then everybody was asking, Like, if out of 10, 3, 4 are asking, that's like probably the right.
Yes, you were listening. You were listening. Your ears were to the ground.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
research. Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, that's how we went, and then we ended up starting a commercial building, full building, which
Okay.
I think a lot of competitors have definitely told me that was the first of the kind where you have an independent building,
Oh,
like which is Bangalore has this 50/80 like concept, right? So 4,000 square feet plots where
yes.
they build independent buildings. And where I kind of thought like a campus terrace will have cafeteria and various things. That was again, I think, honestly, when I signed up, I had no money for it. I thought I'm like money will come, and you know what, money came. So basically it's like I think I signed up 4 buildings within 2 months, and I had like put all my life savings into it, and like then I had no more money to actually do anything more. And then a lot of my friends in US started putting money, and in fact I actually have more than 50 people on my cap table. Like, I think I just raised like 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs from so many people. So I think it had a very different energy, and I just like I don't know if I would recommend people to do that, because I put all my money also. But I think the whole concept was that I think the intensity at which I was going, like people were just like coming with it. And so essentially, and then Bloom Ventures invested. Around the time I needed money for my commercial property, I find somewhere cracked the professional fund. And and eventually I think we sort of I would say we are no longer hip in that sense. The characteristics, and we don't have any foreign employee right now, even though my logo, my initial design, in fact, Maria, she was from Poland. She like was my design head for 2 years. So a lot of this initial stuff was there. They all built momentum and brand and so many things. In fact, I remember my co-founder Ravi, when he met Pranay for the first time. Actually, that's what he told me. Yeah, Pranay asked, "Hey, how do you get all these foreign people? Where do you recruit them?" So apparently that's what he told me. And then I was like, I hope you didn't tell him how we recruit them, because because it has its own visa, it has its own tricks how to get them, right? It's not easy. So basically, so now we have eventually, like to be honest, we have shut down all the villas, because villas lost all their hipness, because at one time all these were absolutely full, right? I mean, even people were coming in BMW to the villas. It's about people, right? Ultimately, it's like you are like the only tea shop in a city, right? All the hip crowd will be there. But eventually, when like 91 came, WeWork came, commercial, there's so many things started happening. I don't think anybody can replicate that. Even neither me or nor anybody can replicate what happened at that time, where there were these 3 villas which are super hip, where all these kind of people partying and so much, because I think the dynamics completely changed. Like everybody got distributed. The same people who were in villa, who were like at paying 4-5 thousand, some of them moved to WeWork. They actually could have afforded it. They didn't come because it was cheap, because it was the happening place of the town, right? So, but unfortunately, I no longer own those happening places, and it kind of, I think, became more mature. And in that sense, I think somewhere I would definitely say we have gravitated where no more villas, commercial buildings. I would say that the closest we are probably today is probably more like 91 in that sense, commercial buildings. I think my interior is probably kind of slightly similar to 91. Maybe there are more colors in my background, right? So I think in many ways I would say that I've seen many people switch from Beehive to 91 to here, but of course 91, not to mention, is a much bigger company, right? So we have stuck to Bangalore, and honestly, I think pandemic is again going to bring a larger change to how we would do business.
Yeah.
So we are already thinking of changing the focus areas, and of course, changing towards larger companies, right? What I would like to call as enterprise co-working is kind of where we are trying to head towards. The focus is on larger customers, and actually we have cracked a lot of larger. In fact, even in pandemic, we actually cracked our second biggest deal ever. So I think that is where the focus is.
Wow.
I think the pandemic has exposed the risks that we took, and we didn't realize. I don't think any of us understood the level of risk we were taking till the pandemic hit us. Honestly, right? When the party was on, we were all partying, but now I think the music stopped. And so basically, I think we all need to. I think the goal, I would definitely think. I think I would reflect what Anand said is. I am also like quite pessimistic near term, right? Like next 1 year, I think the pandemic period is going to be hard. post pandemic, I'm very confident. And what is pandemic is, if I'm coming out of house wearing a mask, it is pandemic, right? As long as the fear is there, as long as the guidelines is there that you need to wear mask and all that, then I don't think it's going to be easy, because the behavior will be hurt, right? The day when things are changed, I think very quickly things will, like whatever distance, a lot of these things in my view will fall back, especially like, the economics will define everything back again. But how will things be during pandemic, and will designs change and all this? Maybe I think it's a question that probably will come up during discussions, but I have my own views. But definitely I'm very, very confident about the long term of this business. And I'm seeing, I think exactly like Anand said, like rest of the 98% we're actually very strongly thinking of being more flexible. We don't want 5 to 10 years leases. I don't want to put money on interiors. And in fact, I've had many people from big companies actually saying, because our co-working spaces is kind of in some of the residential areas also. A lot of people are saying, hey, instead of being at home, I'll walk to the co-working space, and they're actually buying monthly passes and stuff like that. So definitely, I'm definitely a big believer in separating home and work. I just like, for me, it's impossible to work from home, honestly. Like my productivity level is, I don't know, maybe I lack self-discipline or what, I don't know. For me, like home, like geographically, my brain works like that. Home means home, right? It's like work means I can work like 14 hours also. At home, I don't know if I can do 4 hours also per day, right? I mean, honestly, that's the, I don't know if it is for everybody. I believe that it is true for significant percentage of people. Yes. So just like telling everybody work from home, I think only the disciplined guys will deliver. The guys like me who are not so disciplined, honestly, I don't think will deliver at home. That's my kind of view. So that's a short.
So we are now going to, after getting a context on the user, getting an context on the business owners, I'm going to come to Manoj Kothari, founder of Turian Labs, who's a design thinking and a futures thinking expert. He's listening patiently to all of us. And Manoj, bataiye, what's the churn that's going on in your brain at this point in time? What are some of the lights that are blinking for you?
Thanks, Deepa. And yes, I've been listening to the startup stories. And I also want to, because a lot of students are listening, I also want to tell them that, like Shesh just told, it's not that everyone has to go to US, be in Silicon Valley, work for Bloomberg to start a business. You can be in India, you can have a very humble background, and you can start a business to be a startup. So I guess a lot of people are sharing that background, but maybe I don't share that background. So for the student, it may be helpful to know that you can do big, much bigger than what I'm talking about, as a startup story. So thing which I'm seeing right now, I have three hats to wear. One is that I'm an entrepreneur. I run a company, so there are employees, there are I know the kind of discussions which are going on, what's happening to the office and work within my company. That's one point of view. Second point of view is in terms of research which we do, as my company engages into design research. Is there a point of view what's happening around? Because right now there's a current project going on where we are doing a multi-country research exactly on this COVID impact, and I have some fresh inputs on that. And third is looking into the future. Where was it predicted? What can we predict?
Yes.
Beyond a generic guideline that yes, short term is pretty much pretty tough, and long term looks optimistic. And I think Indians are optimistic by far the most. So these three hats I'm saying. So one is that when, as of now, as I said, I'm working alone in my office. Team, everyone right now, the kind of work we do, design research and design thinking based innovation consulting, everyone is scattered. People are in different cities of the country, and maybe in Pune, we just have just countable few who are remaining in my home city right now. And work is happening, and we are overloaded. That's a good news.
Super. Super.
This is a good news that we are overloaded, and I have just hired 3 more guys Out of team of 20, 25 people we run, I've just had 3 more people entering and the biggest challenge I had is how to train them online. So that's the thing which I am right now cracking, because otherwise you would leave as a small office. We don't have a elaborate manual to train people. It is largely by osmosis. People should learn the practices and pick up things from on the job. So the challenge we have right now is how to train the new guys who have just joined in. And so that's one part we are saying. Second thing which I did is I did a small survey with my team. That how has this lockdown been with them? Are they, because there were a lot of things are going on in the discussions, overload of data of COVID, and a lot of churn is going on in people's mind. It came out that people have become slightly more aware of each other's time because of the COVID. Because now they need to give a time to each other, even to talk to, that at 4 o'clock I'll have a call with you, which was never the case, which one could just go across the counter and across the table and just talk it over. So slight efficiency increase I see on one side, but people have started working longer. Now the office doesn't seem to end. Of course, because when you're at home and you're having lunch and your family calls you, you can't say, I'll have only half an hour lunch. Sometimes it just stretches over. So the work times also get stretched over. The third thing which is coming out is that everyone wants more. They don't want to go back to the normal work schedule. That was clear no in the survey within my team. People said we wouldn't like to just work from home also. That is also no. So the sum total is that people want now a more flexible schedule, which is also the common voice I see from Seshan, Anand, and everyone, that people are looking at more flexible schedule. That can I come just once a week? Can I come twice a week? Right now, for example, I am running office. We're saying alternate day will work. There's no reason why alternate day and why not every day. And maybe sometimes 2 people come, sometimes 5, sometimes 10. That's how we are working right now. So that's the one part that we are working, and it's happening. And of course, like everyone else, we have no idea what's going to happen forward. The second part is that what's happening across the world. Now, as I said, there's one study going on right now with small businesses, especially in Brazil and Indonesia, and India, of course, we are doing. And interesting thing in Brazil, unlike India, the president there was slightly more, you can say, Trump-like. So didn't really bother about lockdown initially.
Yes.
And he said, oh, it's nothing. And Brazil has one of the highest mortality rate right now, by the way. And the people are pretty frustrated. And we were frustrated because we were put on early lockdown. So anyway, so the sum total is that nobody had a right answer, the lockdown early or late or whatever. And of course, since the research was going on, so we are also realizing that the concerns which we have, whether it'll get over in 3 months, what will happen to my business, are pretty much universal across 3 countries, 4 countries we know already. It's similar voice coming on. Local governments are supporting in some ways or some incentives, and different industry, beauty industry, travel industry are suffering the most. They have a very dark scenario in front of them, while others are pretty reasonably good situation in front of them, that in 3 months we'll get over with this and be back in office, or at least the regular work will come in. So that situation continues, except in Indonesia that we hear that every third sentence person says, as a businessman, that God will take care of it. That was something unique to us. That India, being with the spiritual heritage, also that word didn't come in the interviews. But in Indonesia, that is almost the most repeating sentence when businessmen speak. That God will take care of this. So that was something interesting. So, and I guess also in the overall scenario which looks around is the sentiment looks positive, that's for sure. That's the overall note which we get. And as I said, the most positive note is within from the Indian businessmen. People are also repurposing their businesses. One of the interesting case from Indonesia is that the restaurants have now got on to the e-commerce bandwagon. to supply to shift to, I mean, use their supply chain or their own supply chain to supply the raw materials sometimes. I saw a case in Pune also where the restaurant, which was shut down for a while, started supplying the recipes, pre-packaged recipes that we sell a lot of great idlis and sambar. We'll give you the recipes of the sambar home delivered. Wow. So this kind of new change, which is repurposing of the business, is happening. And I see from the third hat which I wear was of looking into the future mega trends, which we've been doing for a while, and it's we had some stint at NIFT also, and that's how I got connected to Shalini. Mega trends, we've been reading this interesting science of predicting people's mind over a period, which is, I mean, I got interested in this while I was studying at IIT. There was a course called Futurology back in '92. It's just surprising that there was a course existed like this. I didn't know something can be done like that. And we were discussing futures through Future Shock and those kind of books. Small is beautiful. But later on, I realized that there is very little somebody will pay for such kind of services in India as an entrepreneur. But megatrend is something which is more tangible, which is looks at 5-10 years, doesn't look at 50-year-long scenarios which nobody has a grasp of. So megatrend is an interesting science where what we think is my individual choice. I like red color, and I'm a most swanky guy, and this is the color which my office should be. In fact, it's all pre-programmed as a science, and people like us can earn money out of this, predicting, oh, this segment would like, or this guy would like a red color, and this person would like a yellow one. And this science can be now extracted. For example, one of the recent work we did is now, imagine that I've been doing this megatrend work since 2004 onwards, 2005 onwards, 15 years. After 15 years, now we have started working with very large conglomerates and corporates in India. We were working with the foreign companies, but of course, this concept has now started occurring where we help some companies figure out a 2030 vision, that what could be possibilities for figuring out a new billion-dollar enterprises out of their fold. So from those perspective, I think there is an interesting thing, a trend we were talking of in 2019 was something called abstinence.
Nice.
Abstinence is that there's too much of consumption happening, because we talked of FOMO as a trend. In 2017, we were talking that fear of missing out, social media, everyone is doing something. I need to be on Instagram, have 5 accounts, stuff like that. And now FOMO is shifting to JOMO, which is joy of missing out. That a lot of people had, even before the COVID thing, people were retracting back into their fold, cocooning, decluttering their lives. Marie Kondo kind of effect was coming. A lot of swap groups have come up in India, in Pune itself. People are saying that I want to declutter my house and throw away things which I don't need. Turn vegan, so to say, become more climate conscious, consumption conscious.
Correct.
See, this trend was a very small trend, largely for elite. Even while we were discussing this mega strategy for this conglomerate, and we were talking of migration in India, that how almost 30 people a minute move into from urban area, rural area to urban areas. It's a huge migration shift, which is happening in the urban landscape. We talked that there is a counter trend called reverse migration, which is happening from urban areas to the rural India. And during the workshop, I discussed with this company that why don't we discuss these micro trends, which are actually contra trends.
Yes.
People are consuming more and people are consuming less. People are moving this way and people are moving other side.
Nice.
And there this reverse migration was laughed off. Oh, this is not going to happen. You know, this is a micro trend. Another micro trend was, for example, the climate change fears. We also thought of scenarios that what might go wrong because of the climate change, because of India's growth story we are listening to. $10 billion, $10 trillion economy, which India is going to be in 2030. And the serious challenge is the climate change. In this climate change, if you look up the 2010, WHO report, it details out the different fears of virus-related airborne disease, which is going to have serious repercussions on the economy and people's health. But probably we, like everybody else, we just laughed it off, and it is now showing up. One similar effect is the flooding of the cities, the coastal cities. Now, it's something which is predicted to be in by 2040 or 50, that half the Mumbai will be submerged. Okay, it's a draconian prediction or maybe reading. A lot of coastal cities will be submerged. But now it's a reading, it's a scientific reading. Whether it will happen in 2040 or 2039 or 2039, we don't know. Or maybe 10 years earlier, we don't know that. So I think one of the things which is predicted out of this, or which is maybe studied out of futures, is that the climate change is bringing a lot of this black swan events, likely to bring in. And we should be ready for more such effects.
Yeah.
And that's where the real challenge or real innovation thinking would come into picture, that how quickly can we repurpose things. If we all know that social, that restaurant chain or co-working chain, we call it, social has been a case where the daytime you're a workplace, nighttime you change into something else, a bar or a party space. So I think repurposing, apart from other things, maybe just bringing more flexibility, repurposing is something, or part repurposing could be a great phenomena for co-working spaces to look at.
Very
that's the broader chain, that once we look at the broader mega trends, there are certain patterns which emerge and we can definitely leverage them. And I think Shalini will probably add them some more, enrich them. That's all from me.
Manoj, that was super. This is where I feel so bad as 10-minute airtime per panelist. So my job as a moderator is most unenviable, and I would love to keep listening to you, Manoj. So we had spoken a couple of months ago that we'll speak on the phone. Now I'm probably giving you a call later in the day today. Thank you. Shalini,
Yes.
over to you, trends expert at
Yeah.
NIFT, and so much of what Manoj has been speaking, and particularly even for fashion, this is such a interesting time to pivot, and we are talking about fashion shows which have moved completely digital.
Oh, no,
And
absolutely.
tell us again, what is your view on this phenomenon of co-working space and social, and we also spoke about physical distancing and not social
Yes.
distancing just before we started our
Yeah.
session today.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Deepa. It's very difficult to be the last one when a lot has already been spoken, And at the same time, a lot of what Manoj said, I would like to kind of continue on that note, because whether we like it or not, airborne diseases is going to be a part and parcel of how the next set of things we are seeing. We've already seen a rise of some other viruses coming around. So, in the sense, spaces and how we define those spaces and how we're going to interact in those spaces will completely take on a new meaning, To me, spaces are emotional, and maybe that's me. But when you get into a space and you're working in that space, you're spending many hours in that space. Just like Shesh said, I love working at, work for me is work, and he could spend 14 hours doing that, and home is home. Maybe we were in a very linear mode in India, specifically linear mode. The term flexibility when it came to work had not been introduced, and what lockdown has done for us is opened our minds to something like that. I mean, I'm not saying about startups, but I'm talking about across the board, this concept of acceptability towards how we work, and recognizing that space in terms of the space required by a person to work, and even the physical space within which they work. Having spent 4 months in this situation, I think there is also a need to get out and it is very difficult to work to kind of merge the two together. Home and work kind of overlaps to such an extent that sometimes it's very difficult. Like Manoj was talking about. So therefore, people would be looking at spaces close to their homes, like Rajshri said, like Anand said. We would be looking at a kind of a hyperlocal situation where we do get out of the home. We are not too far away from home, but at the same time, we are creating a space which delineates our personal and of work. In that sense, I do see, I had discussed, I mean, we were discussing it sometime back again. I do see large corporates kind of moving into this area because now, it's just going to make sense to have look at possibilities which give you easy entry and exit policies, which also allow people to work but work closer to their homes. So in the sense, people are comfortable in their mind, in their mind space to be able to work. But having said that, what Shesh said, that they moved away from these beautiful villas into these bigger areas. Actually, I also feel that there would be a move towards going into a very specifically kind of, niche co-working space. So you may have, all the creative people in one area or wanting to be in one
Yes.
area, because everybody has been talking about community as the biggest, connector here. So, we would be looking for that emotional connect and that social connect and that networking aspect there. So I do see that these niche working spaces will kind of start emerging, and if and that in itself will become an ecosystem of its own. So you may have.
Villas will come back, Shalini, for sure.
Sorry.
Villas are going to come back.
Yeah,
Shesh.
Yes. I was going to say that, Shesh, you said we moved away, but today I think creating that homing experience within the work scenario where you belong, and it is, of course, I mean, I'm not going to talk about all the safety regard issues in terms of 6 feet and all that would have to happen now. Because you said we're going to wear masks and get out. I think we're going to, if not mask, something else will come on, but we are going to be going to a field where these things are going to be there. So instead of bringing out the fear psychosis, it would be important to bring out the positive aspects to it. Okay, fine, it's all there, but how do we deal with it? And how do we get on with work? Honestly, what all of you have said, um, uh, you know, working from home, the working hours have only just increased. There are no weekends. We could for leave the startup, but other business possibilities, we could leave the work somewhere and we could have a weekend, but there are no weekends today. It just kind of overlaps one into the other. So how do you create and people are getting comfortable with that now. I have to say that people are getting comfortable with that. So how do you create these communities which are on its own, which are not clearly uh, work sanitized, and they're clearly not home, and that would also really help merge in many aspects to people, because we may have a lot of parents dwindling between kids having their online schools and things like that, and you working from home. So you manage the two together simultaneously in terms of these kind of things. And I also think that one thing, I mean, that's something I've been observing. People have uh, the lockdown has brought in this love for greens.
Yes.
Suddenly we have loads of greens, and people are bringing in those greens into their home. And I think workspaces in co-working spaces will be bringing in something similar as well. So these are micro trends. In terms of mega trends, there would be a lot more things that will happen. But I think there's a huge possibility there, because the 98% Anand spoke about, you know, in the first go, that 98% will become a part and parcel of co-working spaces.
Absolutely.
And that is going to definitely grow.
Very, very interesting. Shalini, thanks for that. You know, and I must take a second to tell you all three very niche areas that we saw in Israel when Milind and I went on this work come study trip to understand the startup ecosystem there. One was a very interesting thing that this lady Mera Oren had started, which was co-working spaces, which was specifically targeted to women entrepreneurs. So the people, the applicants needed to have one of the key promoters as a woman. And that was one example, which was interesting. The other one was a tech focused incubator. So that was very tech oriented, high tech, where they had mentoring, they had Gyan sessions. They also had, for the techies, they also brought in dimensions of, more business understanding, finance, those aspects. And the third, which to me was most interesting, was called Agent Work. And Agent Work was for 40 plus people, where they were also getting retrained and reskilled into repurposing careers. And I thought that was very interesting. And they had a very quaint ritual. So the moment the person actually got work or started an enterprise, there was a wall of wine where you actually brought and put your bottle of wine with a little tag of where you were moving to, and everybody could party, but that bottle stayed there. So I just wanted to share this little story from my side. Thanks to the panelists, because are wanting to say something. I think at this point in time, I can read it in your
Sure.
eyes.
Sure, Deepa. I'll take a minute. I wanted to push that argument a little further about trends and micro trends. And I just want to reflect on this time as a time for opportunity, because there are certain underlying micro trends which have been there, but times like these, disruptive times, are the best time to shape trends or drive trends, to create the necessary incentives. And I'll just take a couple of examples. So 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
Right, 9/11 happened, and people, stopped fearing flying after a while. Everybody's been flying after that. But a product like insurance against terrorist threat survived. Similarly, demonetization happened. Today, I guess people are not worried about holding cash again, but still, everybody's so used to Paytm and online wallets that it's become an integral part of our livelihoods, even if the use case is gone now, which was the demonetization. So disruptive times like these are fantastic times to really shape trends, to really drive consumer behavior in a certain direction. And this happens, anybody who's prepared for these times, who looks at these times as a time of opportunity, can actually shape demand in a certain way to reorient their products, and at the same time, so basically, leverage these times to come up with more suited solutions.
Thank you. I think that's very useful. I think a couple of themes that kept coming was flexibility. And flexibility means reorienting the way we do work and sort of rewire the way we will draw up our contract. So in the short term, can Shesh, Shrishti, Anand, Vikas tell us what's happening in terms of some of the new ways of working that are coming up? We have about 10 minutes to close this discussion.
Okay, quickly, I will probably wind it quick. And in terms of my view, would be I think two aspects are there. Flexibility in terms of contracts, I think, is how a CEO or a CFO would look at things, or a business owner, right? The flexibility in terms of where to work, etc. There's an employee aspect, or the actual person who works aspect as well, right? So in terms of definitely, I think both of these should be considered in certain ways. What the trend I definitely see is that as of now, definitely a lot of larger companies are giving up own offices for a certain period and moving to smaller co-working, smaller than what they had, let's say, right? Yes. Somebody was at 100 seats, they may be like, I will have a 20-30 seater co-working space, because I don't know who will come every day. some people may come every day, some people may come once in a while. So a lot of established companies cannot be without office. So they need an address, they need a place, right? So that's one trend. Many are actually dividing large office. I think Microsoft seems to be one of them who was like more popular ones, who do plan to have multiple offices once their leases start expiring. So that also to avoid commute, and I think tomorrow if there is a pandemic, be there in multiple places. In fact, many of my customers are actually splitting across multiple properties that we have. So I think, and also the other thing is from a user perspective, a lot of them who have been given flexibility to work from home and also certain payment, they are taking up co-working space on their own near their home. They're like, that's better than a lot of them. Yeah, of course, if there are kids at home, there could be various reasons, right? It's better to. So I see these are some of the trends, if I want to quickly.
Thanks. Yeah. Anand?
Yeah, so similar. I think contractual flexibility is really people just managing their risk, right? They don't want to make long-term fixed commitments. They want to pay for what they use. The workspace is going to be more interesting, right? Where, do our layouts have to change to, how long is this going to be? What are the kind of safety measures and so on? And the use cases are also changing, right? So, it's still the same company, but many companies, for example, are inquiring about, my people will use the space some of the time. Right? So, okay, you have 8 spaces in Bangalore. Can I tell all my employees use whichever one is closest to you? But they'll still work from home 2 days a week and come to the office maybe 3 days a week, right? Now, how do we manage that? How do we manage our desks, our inventory, and so on? There's some logistical challenges with that. And then there's brand new customer sets. Like, in fact, we have a lot of students suddenly coming, right? Because they're all doing classes online and the internet at home and the noise and so on is not working for them, right? So there's all these new things that we're discovering about, the needs of the market. And as Vikas said, some of this is temporary. Students, I'm assuming, will eventually go back to the college, but some of it will persist, right? And not just in our industry, and I think when I talk to our members and how are their companies going, I think everyone's saying this, that it's a crisis, but it's also a time of opportunity, and it's a leveler. Because I'm not as concerned about demand long term. I'm not concerned as much about our bigger competitors with more money doing better than us. I'm also concerned about, hey, the market is changing, and some new startup may recognize that change and solve that problem better than us, right? So it's a great leveler, right? Because it's everything's in flux, and there is this, whoever reads it correctly and can listen to customers and predict the future, I think they'll be in a good position going forward, right? So, in terms of our industry, the risk management stuff, contractual stuff is straightforward. But should we tear down all our spaces and fully remodel them because work has changed permanently forever? I'm not ready to say that, right? I think that's something that's still evolving.
Fair. Thank you.
I just want to add over there regarding, Anand is right. There's a lot of discussion going around. When the pandemic first started, like people started with the whole concept that, is co-working over, and will people be ready to share a space with other people who they don't necessarily know where they're coming from. But again, that is the like we as humans are social animals, right? As going back to the starting of this conversation, we actually need human interaction. We need that another person to bounce ideas, to bounce things off of, to learn from, to grow. So we absolutely need that. So definitely we need to continue to work on this. But does that mean that there may not be any design changes or safety measures? I think we might have to be a little bit more flexible in terms of giving that comfort or giving that safety to our clients. Like if someone wants, instead of having open workstations, now people are more interested in private cabins, let's say. So there may be some tweaks that we may have to do in terms of our design. Of course, a lot of safety measures that we have implemented as a co-working space. I think each of us has implemented like a huge, number of safety measures that we couldn't even have imagined, earlier, that we would be doing all this to make sure that our customers feel safe. So of course, I'm just talking about the short-term trends that have actually come up in co-working. I don't know how many of them will really stay, but these are the sort of things that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
No, I think very, very interesting. And yeah, I mean, all making a case that for the emotional well-being, for being even for being happy, for feeling connected and human, we will need to at some point in time go back to working and collaborating with people that we normally hang out with, or even new people for us to work with. Um, I think I can take maybe a question here. Uh, what marketing agendas would the co working spaces focus on to tackle post pandemic audiences? So that's a question coming in. Um, in terms, I think it's really about reorganizing, repurposing would really mean, I think even the needs are getting morphed. So as who would have thought a student would access a co-working space? So I think it's really going to be defined by needs, just like hotels are becoming hospitals. Who knows? I mean, there could be classrooms, schools, some the whole local part means that pretty much very anything is possible.
And this, I'll just like to add something as a consumer on what Shalini, Manoj, and Anand definitely said. One micro trend that we are also seeing, and because I speak with a lot of people in the community, a lot of people are today quitting WeWork also, or any co-working, because somewhere they have to manage their home. So like Shalini said, yes, we've got used to, the stress level of working always. I think this is also high. It's plateaued right now. There was, first we were not comfortable, then we've now got comfortable. But a fallout I'm seeing out of that is the stress level in terms of just the physical manifestation of suicides or depression is going up. And there lies also a space that if co-working in the future can accommodate, and it is in most co-works they do accommodate children sometime, and we can get them. There is that flexibility.
Absolutely.
But that I see is a crucial thing, because I know a lot of my peers who are not willing to go back also, because they just, the children have online classes. You are working mostly in the night because you need to look after them in the day. So I think there's definitely a micro trend there to address, in some sense, that maybe the workspace would become the biggest outlet for people to actually go there and really leave that part of social life that you are missing right now at home. And if that can be more inclusive, there's an overemphasis on safety, of course, but then how do you actually make it social? Because your parties are now going to become more your family, your friends, who don't have COVID, who have been safe. So how do you kind of bring that in as a micro trend to address the stress? Is something that you would see it right now on the social media. It's all over the place in terms of
Yeah.
addressing mental health, but bringing that, I think,
I think we lost
Yeah.
Rashi, but I think it's
Can I just add a point to there where you said that hospitals are repurposing themselves? Actually, the idea also was there that there are these concepts that are moving around, that the co-working space might even have to add UV lighting at night to disinfect the entire place for the next day, just like hospitals do, you know. So, you have these things which will kind of merge in, the disinfection, and how do you, make sanitize it, and what do you use? Antimicrobial finishes, surfaces, things like that would also come in for sanitization and for more effective.
Yeah. Even things like for the emotional well-being, there could be so many things. For example, pets. We always know that greens, pets. These are also things which have been part of social or started becoming part of social. Uh, the whole value adds that we possibly knew at one point in time we might need to reconsider, or and no longer as value adds but possibly just core necessities, just as maybe coping mechanisms or ways for people to engage. So whether it's the way we engage with spaces, Shalini, you talked about spaces being emotional. And I think that's a very, very important point. Yes, so we are a minute away from closing this webinar. Any
Maybe
last
I can.
words? Yes, Manoj.
So, the one connected thought which came to my mind is that sometime back we were looking at the trends in office furniture for a client, and of course, that time companies were open seating was a preferred mode of seating in across several offices, including co-working places. You have a long desk without any partitions, all partitions gone, and people just take a chair and sit across, chat across, have laptops. By far, the Silicon Valley culture pretty much colored the entire Indian model as well. And also companies like a lot of large manufacturing companies, their corporate offices started looking like one huge hall filled with just empty desks and people whispering because you can't speak loudly. It was very spooky to see that scenario sometimes. But I think slightly closer to the recent past, and people started realizing that complete open seating was not really workable because finally you need privacy, you need certain reflection time, certain personal spaces, and that's where the office furniture industry started moving back with certain modification, I would say, into not exactly cubicles, but maybe you can think of more cocoons came in, where at least two people, if they sit together, like if you've seen some furniture which is like eggshells, half eggshells open, people can sit together and talk in privacy. So I think going forward now, because of COVID, this trend would further accelerate. And you can say open cocoons. How can you create more open cocoons in the office in order to separate you, but not to separate you?
Very interesting.
So to say. Uh, and that would be probably use more glass, still have visible partition, but accessible so you can walk up. That could be a potential direction for rethinking the layout, so to say.
No, I think very, very useful. Overall, I think if I were to sum up, we talked about concepts like flexibility, hyper-local models, a lot of newer target audiences who will then now come into co-working spaces, newer business models, different materials that we will probably use for the layouts to happen. Somewhere maybe the whole sanitation, protection, these are going to become part of our DNA as a people. We've taken a lot of, our sense of clean and cleansing has always been so much more ritual, has so much, there's a dimension of spirituality which kind of, the Ganga water is always pure to be drunk, in quotes. So therefore, the whole notions of purity, cleansing, hygiene, uh, being able to, I think, collaborate more and being able to be more human, and the walls between our work and home breaking down, and we being the same self, being able to manage ourselves. And I think the most important thing is, I still go back to what Anand mentions, the 2% and the 98% are all coming together. So if 2% was what in real estate terms co-working spaces are today, the 98% that had no access or felt that they were not for us, suddenly they become something that I could consider and reckon with. So for the audiences who have watched us, we are 3 minutes about time. NIFT, thank you very much for putting this together. Dr. Shalini Sood, Manoj Kothari, Rashmi Gulati, thank you for organizing and putting us together. So also Dr. Rupa Agarwal and Mr. Nitin Kulkarni. Nitin Salve, thank you for all the tech support. My panelists, thank you Srishti, thank you Rajri, Vikas, Lakhan, thank you. Anand Vemuri, thank you very much. Shesh, thank you very much. Uh,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It was
Thank
a
you.
great food of thoughts. Very rightly said by Mr. Vikas, destructive times like this are actually time for opportunity. And at time of great adversities, that entrepreneurs are born. So in the audience, we have our students, alumni, who have entered into startup should jump up and grab this opportunity and scale up their ventures. Taking forward, sharing is still the mantra, and it's not social distancing, but physical distancing. People look forward for visual and intellectual simulation. Thank you very much for such an interesting and engaging conversation. And there are many points which we can take off. On behalf of Department of NIFT Mumbai, I would like to extend a warm note of appreciation and thank you to all my panelists, Shesh, Anand, Shrishti, Vikas, Manoj, Rajshri, and Professor Dr. Shalini Sood. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being so supportive and accepting our invite to be on the panel. A big thank you to our director, Professor Dr. Pawan Godiawala, to encourage each one of us to brainstorm on the topic and hold webinar during this pandemic days. Thank you for seeding this idea and giving us opportunity to interact with the big Bs of the various industry. My humble gratitude and a big thank you to our campus academic coordinator, Professor Dr. Rupa Agrawal, for all her motivation, push, and hand-holding at each step to make this a great success. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Rupa. Special thanks to our technical team, Mr. Nitin Salve and Vandana Vankire, for all technical support and constant help in promotion and marketing of the event. I would like to express my gratitude to my department faculty, Professor Dr. Rupa Agrawal and Mr. Nitin Kulkarni, who is also our chairperson of MDIS department, and all NIFT faculty fraternity for their constant support and always being there. This event would not have been successful without our student and alumni and all our precious audience. Thank you to all our students, alumni, and audience who have registered and attending the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deepa, and thank you, NIFT Mumbai.
Thank you, Mumbai. Thanks, Deepa.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Deepa.
Luck.
Bye.
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 थोड़ा रहता फेस पूरा स्क्रीन म्यूट किया